Hello and welcome to Shaman Sister Sessions, episode 83, Through the Veil. I'm Michelle Hawk, and I'm here with my Shaman sister, Katherine Bird. Together, this offering came to be born, I guess, almost exactly 2 years ago, right? And through our friendship, our sisterhood, and our conversations about what it means to do this work in the world, what it means to serve, the nature of spiritual practice, and asking ourselves big questions like, who am I and what the fuck am I doing with my life? So for more of those questions and more of those investigations, please keep tuning in. Yeah, I'm cracking Kat up apparently, but I mean, let's be honest, like if you're here, you're probably asking yourself some of those questions too. If you're not, you might not be in the right place, just saying. So let's dive in today with some investigation into this theme around moving through the veil. We're here, today's October 30th, for those of you joining later. So we're tuning in right before Halloween, the All Hallows, and this is a time of year when the veil is seen as more thin, and there are a lot of these energies and spirit realms that are a lot more accessible than really any other time. So this is why we're diving into this today. In case you missed it a couple of weeks ago, we were joined by special guest David Rostowski, who spoke with us about what it means to live a life aligned with spiritual guidance. Some of that is related to what we're tuning into today. In case you missed it, you can go ahead and scoot back to our YouTube channel or iTunes and Stitcher and catch up on it there. But let's kind of delve into some of what's coming up. Kat, how are you doing?
I am making it through. I just arrived in LA, and I have now moved all my stuff into storage and moving on to the next adventure, which will be to come and visit you in Oregon.
Yeah.
So overall, fairly exhausted. Been kind of an unexpected move over the last 2 weeks. So I've just been moving an extraordinary amount of stuff over the last 2 weeks. So I am kind of just in that space, and in the space of releasing and letting go and welcoming something new, and kind of not having had enough time to actually sit in the presence of what's the next thing or anything around that, just kind of trusting everything, and just been so busy that there's been very little time for much else, honestly. The past couple of weeks, it's been a big push.
Yeah, I totally hear you. And it sounds like some of what you're experiencing is, indirectly related to some of what we're noticing in the times right now, of kind of digging deep into the lineages, into the patterns of how we have built ourselves, and looking at what doesn't serve anymore and doing some catharsis work. So I think, and go ahead and chat in if you can relate to any of that. I know I can, absolutely. And looking at Kat's experience as one of the reflections of how this can manifest. And we're sitting in some really fun Scorpio energies right now. So,
and it's been, it's the fall time, which is the perfect time for this. And we often have these experiences where there's that need to let go and surrender and release and shed the leaves, to be able to find more stillness. And I know that I've been getting a message for months and months around letting go and letting go and letting go, and doing less and taking on less and committing less to things, and even taking on less clients, and now it's letting go of my home and my land where I've been for the last 3 years, and kind of releasing attachment to a lot of stuff and a lot of place in order to find that, be able to move, I believe, into a new season of true rest. I hope at some point there will be rest, and the sitting and the being really still and present, and hopefully being able to refocus energy from that place of stillness. And we talk a lot on this podcast about the seasonal changes and the cycles. It's something that both of us are very committed to being in presence around, noticing both astrologically and with the moon and the solar returns and sort of all of these different cycles that we're going through, and to be conscious and aware of the cycles of our being. It's also funny, in human design, my thing, I forget what it's called, but it's all about cycles. And so just being very aware that as we're moving through these different cycles, sometimes we can see things as, oh, everything's falling apart, or I'm being pushed into something, or this isn't what I want, or I'm experiencing some sort of death in my life, or some sort of reemergence of something I didn't plan on coming. And I think I'm finding it very helpful to be resting in the presence of the cycle, and to be able to be conscious and aware of these different cycles that we have in our life, and how things kind of come up for review. And we have those different moments when it's like, oh, okay, yeah, no, it seems like chaos, or it seems like catastrophe, or it seems like all these things we could put these names on because our equilibrium has been shaken up a bit, but it's actually right on time. It's the perfect thing. It's exactly what is called for in this moment in order for the next piece to emerge. So I'm definitely deep in that mystery at the moment, because there's not a lot of clarity, and we love clarity as humans. Like, oh, when a good dose of clarity, what's next? But the mystery is definitely where I'm sitting. And I think that as spiritual practitioners and seekers, that being very comfortable to sit in the darkness and to sit in the mystery and the unknown is a lot of what our practice is about. To be able to be present with that for others and for ourselves is really important. So sometimes it's I think we get a big doses of it so that we can get really comfortable with it.
Yeah, and we did have somebody chat in saying they could relate, and I know that that there's more of us out there who are having experience with that too. So I'm noticing also the theme of our conversation seems to be weaving in some of these autumnal cycles, and that's awesome. And looking at what you're sharing, Kat, through the lens of the veil being really thin this time of year, the mystery and the uncertainty around what does it mean to invite loss? What does it mean to invite catharsis? Because really, when you're talking about this season of life, that's what we're doing. We're inviting shedding, we're inviting death on purpose, knowing that the tree can't keep their leaves all year if they hope to grow new leaves, and the leaves will get really ratty and ragged and you won't want to keep them around, right? So the tree intentionally has its own cycle of power, its own cycle of life, where this is a time for shedding. And if we are aligning to that cycle, we are very conscientiously saying, okay, I'm ready to release, I'm ready to let go. And the inherent mystery of that, and that access to what is the frequency of energy that we're inviting in a time of death. We're inviting in what we can't understand. We're inviting in the unseen. We're inviting in potential, because within death and within, as we're going into this time of darkness and accessing these energies that are more present and kind of close to the surface, we're inviting in the unseen, and we're inviting in the darkness. And I think that is something that goes against a lot of our, I guess, energetic common sense. We are light seekers. Generally, we move toward warmth, we move toward comfort, we move toward safety, toward the known. Our human brains are wired to seek out more of the same because it is a known quantity. So by saying, okay, I'm going to release this thing, we are actively moving against our instincts for survival by saying, I am sending this familiar thing away, and who knows what the heck is going to be coming in. So it is this very active process of putting ourselves in positions of uncertainty, mystery, and darkness. And yet it's totally necessary, because without that, there is nothing new. There is no process of creation. So it's exposing ourselves to the discomfort of that and being able to hold ourselves in that darkness and treat it maybe instead of like a dark, scary house where you're lost and you don't know where anything is, more like you're, like an earth cave, like a womb cave, where we get to sort of hunker down and be in uncertainty and know that we're moving toward something else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And, as we're like this other piece around this theme of where we're at right now, the reality of this thinning of the veil, and then our human tendency towards our seeking to understand the mysteries, to seeking to understand death, to understanding what's next, to understanding the shadow aspects of ourselves, and then the shadow aspects of the spiritual realms. This is when this is the time to be with this stuff. And we can see it all around us, and it's so funny. And I love Halloween. I love Halloween time. I love the weirdness of Halloween, and all of its like layers upon oddity that comes into its expression in the United States. And I think the United States is like, we have this fascinating in enjoyment of this holiday that I don't think exists in other places. And, our stores are full of skeletons and scary things, and this reminder of death everywhere. Of course, it's right next door to Christmas trees now, but it's it's this reminder of that we aren't alone, that there is, like, we're obsessed with the fact that there are all of these other unknown entities and creatures that are just beyond our reach. They're just there beyond us. And a lot of times as the practitioners that we are, we're kind of the between those realms and those realities for people, and for all of the people that are aware of those realities but don't find it socially acceptable, or they don't have a place to own the fact that, oh, that actually is real for me. It's not just a story in a book. It's not just a thing I saw on TV. This is a real thing, that the veils are thin for a lot of people. And at this time of year, we get to be a little bit more confronted, I think, with the fact that there's a lot of stuff out there that even if you're the most psychic person, you're the most tuned in person, like, you couldn't be aware of everything that was out there, because you would just go insane, because there's so much stuff out there. And I think that this reminder of the, like, the multitude of realities, this multidimensional experience that we are having here on this planet, that we get to be so biologically locked in, and we also get to be so aware of spiritual nature and forces and nature in general, it's like this time of year, the change is so extreme. Like, it's just like happening, and it's like crushing us in a way into this crucible of awareness. And I find that part of this time of year really fascinating, because it's like, hey, we don't talk about this stuff ever, but we've got a holiday that's like, we're gonna put on crazy costumes, and there's like skeletons everywhere, and masks and stuff about witches. And like a lot of us, we've spent lifetimes trying to pretend that we're not witches. And then there's this like one little piece of the year that we're like, oh, witches, celebrate the witches.
Well, is it, so this is where, like, I hate Halloween. I got to come out and say it. And so, like, I guess I really love the the original intention of Halloween, and the modern interpretation drives me bonkers. And so, I have to ask, is it actually celebration of witches, or is it demonization?
It's both.
It's, yeah, totally. I guess, yeah, fair. It's both. But looking at, what, like, the reasons I hate Halloween, I hate being scared, like jumping out, intentionally, like horror movies. Oh my God, can't handle it. I don't like candy. I I don't know why else don't I like Halloween? The demonization of the darkness, that I think is, really the core reason, where it's taking all these symbols. And again, the US does have a little bit of a different.
We're weird over here.
Right. I think you used the word obsession at one point, and I was like, yeah, totally. This, so living in other countries, like, they don't celebrate Halloween.
No.
Worldwide. It's, I went over, and when I was living in Spain, especially, I was talking about, and this is relatively recently after I got there, and we came up on Halloween. They're like, what are you talking about? Oh, that's Carnival. Like, yeah, that's in February where people wear masks and stuff. I'm like, no, that's a different thing entirely. But this idea of this obsession with the unknown and the unseen, and it's almost like this is the only access point of like, ooh, scary, haha, like plastic toys and candy, like, having to put the commercial spin on something that is incredibly powerful. Let's be real, incredibly powerful, holds a lot of ancestral stuff, and again, the like, there's all these memes floating around the internet of like, we are the granddaughters of the witches you didn't burn, ha ha ha, and like, well, we probably
burned them.
You burned them, but like, we're back, hey, and it never went away, and it doesn't go away. That's the thing, is like, magic is here to stay. Magic is real. The darkness is here to stay. It is real. Death is here to stay. It is real, and it doesn't have to be feared. It doesn't have to be demonized. It doesn't have to be commercialized. And I think this is one of the pieces where I look at the way in which people are relating to something so incredibly sacred. And I mean, I guess, like, in case you couldn't tell, I am a total killjoy on holidays in general.
But come on, like, this is our tendency. We live in a very capitalistic society that utilizes any sort of sacred or religious or anything that comes up. We have marketing people who have figured out how to. I mean, Easter. What the fuck is Easter? Like, it is so much conglomeration of different traditions that has turned into just a sugar fest and a way to buy stuffed animals. It's like the weirdest stuff that we have access.
Or even worse, real baby animals.
Right. It's like the worst of the worst, right?
Right, exactly.
We figure out how to mess this stuff up every time.
Totally. But looking at, what potential do we have our hands on here? And, we hear all these stories about, ooh, bring your Ouija board out on Halloween because, the veil is thin and it's easy.
Don't do that. Don't do that.
No.
Just don't do it.
Kat doesn't like Ouija boards. Why later.
I liked Ouija boards as a child. I was really into Ouija boards, and they freaked me out because lots of crazy stuff happened.
Right, because it's real.
Yeah, and I want to I think that one of the reasons I like Halloween is because of this season and because of what is like the underlying stuff of what's going on here and the richness of it. It's like I mean, I'm in Southern California, so you get a little bit less of it, but there's just this energy and in the air that comes with the fall. That's like the moisture and there's a potency that happens in this time of year that is about this veil being thin. There is something to this shift at this time of year that contributes to this deepening of our connection to our ancestors, to the spirits of the land, to disembodied beings, and to these different traditions, which I find is really, I want to say, nurturing in a lot of ways.
I like that. I can see that. And, suffice it to say that the access point for magic is much more available, I think, is a fair way to look at this, is as so everything that we're dealing with in this time of year is available. I will say it is available throughout the rest of the year, but the access point is a little easier to find because it's in the collective consciousness, because of the energetics supporting this time, because of the Scorpio archetype. There's so many reasons why it's a little more potent. It's, think of like the volume being turned up. So even if you have, you know, a music playing in the background and the volume is low, you can still always hear it. And somebody with really good hearing can be like, oh, I hear that. Okay. And I know that song. Gotcha. And then this time of year, the volume is turned up. And it's like, oh, okay, now it's a little more accessible and more people can hear what is already there. So we're not, keep in mind, everything we're talking about today and everything during this season is always available, and yet it becomes more readily present in the collective consciousness. And it's kind of like, you know, when that quantum number of people start hearing the song, you know, if you start the music low and then you slowly turn it up, then it's like more and more people kind of start dancing with it a little bit. And it's like it changes the whole scene, even though the music was always there. So that's kind of what we're in right now, is more people are dancing to this music, more people are putting on their witch costumes and celebrating the underworld. And I've seen a lot of really fun interpretations of shadow stuff that's coming up. People, it feels like are on purpose costuming to the shadow, or to like the dark goddess, or to all these different pieces of the archetypes that are historically a little more secretive, and the volume is being turned up. So we're making it more available by our attention and energy as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I want to share something, because this, around this time of year, this last month, in my channeling practice group, the Open Your Channel practice group, which meets every month, and we work with different beings every month. And so, you know, we work with galactics and angels and our ancestors and medium mentors and all this. And so, of course, in October, we decided to work with the deceased, and it really brought up a lot of stuff. And now these are people who have gone to a channeling course. They've, you know, gone to a channeling retreat. They've done, I think this is our 8th month of a channeling practice. And still there's this like, I don't really want to like, there's this, it brought up for all of us. I mean, some of us more than others, this fear and belief systems and childhood trauma around ghosts and dead people. And you know, I think a lot of that comes in from our media and the commercialization of Halloween and needing, you know, all these scary movies and things like that we saw when we were kids, and going to places and getting scared, and this demonization of, it's almost like the demonization of demons, and and how, you know, that this stuff that is, a lot of us, is the reason that people who are psychic and have seeing abilities and have these intuitive abilities shut that stuff down as kids, because, oh wow, that thing was really scary that I experienced, that was just happened to be some disembodied being walking across the room, that, oh, now I'm going to shut everything down. And so we have a lot of people who have shut down a lot of abilities because of our demonization of disembodied beings,
Mm-hmm.
of our relationship with the dead, with the ancestors. And in other cultures, we did an episode on ancestors at some point, working with our ancestors, right?
We did a year ago. Yeah, we did a Dearly Departed episode. So on working with the deceased.
Yeah. And we've so demonized it that it's this fascinating thing where it's like this cultural collective, what do I want to say? It's like a signal. It's like a hypnotic state. It's this thing that we've all been programmed with so completely since we were children, that a lot of us that are mystics and you know, have these different awarenesses have suffered and struggled our whole lives because of the way that we have demonized the darkness and the shadow and the thin veil.
Well, then it becomes, you know, this collective alienation, and, oh, if that thing is bad because it makes people afraid, and I can see that thing and I can interact with that thing, then maybe I'm bad.
Mm-hmm.
or I'm wrong, or I'm scary. And so then, not having a context for it, and also, being like, there's inherently, it's speaking to rejection, right? And so, when we're working with shadow, the shadow of self is a rejected part of the self. And here we can extrapolate that out and look at, well, the shadow of society is a rejected part of society. And here, especially in the West, especially in the United States, we reject the dead and the relationship with the other side. And so it takes on this shadow quality, meaning it's not understood, it's not accessible, it's not honored. And looking at other societies that have a much healthier relationship with honoring the ancestors, honoring the deceased, honoring the mysteries, honoring the unknown, it doesn't carry the same charge of fear and of demonization. Instead, it's accessible, it's understood. And it's like, oh yeah, she talks to the ancestors, so-and-so, like, no big deal, whatever. As opposed to in the US, like, oh my God, you're crazy, you're hearing voices, because it's kind of like, and we parcel these things together that maybe belong together, maybe don't, and yet under the heading of the unseen and the mystery. And that's what we're talking about, today, with this access point into the mystery, access point into the veil, the charge becoming, making it more readily available. And then having people, like, if you're tuning in, I can pretty much guarantee that you've had some experiences with this, or you're, wanting to give context to experiences that you had as a child, or noticing that, oh, I have abilities that other people don't, or etc. And again, it's like, it's always there. We can always tune into this, but this time period, I really want to explore the idea of how can we actually relate to Halloween? How can we relate to this time of year? Kat, as you were talking about this time of moving and this time of shedding, how can we bring in a healthier relationship personally and transpersonally with death and with loss and with the darkness, which would then make these times of change a little more comfortable, perhaps, and a little more easy, and have a better access point to, I don't know what's going to happen, and that's okay. And have that also affect our greater relationship with the mystery of, I don't know what that is, and that's okay.
Right? Because now, until we hit the solstice, we're in the deepest waters. We're in the darkest descent. And we're in the place where the mystery is the greatest. And so we should always be looking at how we can take advantage of whatever the energy is that we're in at the moment, instead of fighting really hard trying to swim upstream against it. Mm-hmm. Of, oh, this is where we're at. Okay, great. It's totally fine that I'm having these feelings. It's totally, oh, hey, yeah, I'm seeing more stuff right now. That's interesting. Okay, great. No problem. And just to have that awareness of, oh, I'm actually maybe I'm experiencing more of my shadow aspects, or more of my deeper, darkest. Oh, I'm wanting to dress differently, or I'm wanting to engage in different activities, and landing within that greater realm of self-acceptance for who we are at every moment. Mm-hmm. At every moment, that this is now perfect. It's perfect.
Mm-hmm. I love what you said. I want to come alongside what you talked about of now until the solstice, we're in our time of the deepest darkness. And let's take a moment and look at some of the archetypal, or, the two primary archetype influences that we're working with from now until the solstice. So less than 2 months from now, we have the Scorpio archetype, which we're full on in right now, the sun in Scorpio, which is the alchemist. It's the magician. It's the they who work with the underworld, the unseen forces. So Halloween times 1,000, think, for example, of this access point into magic. And then following this, we have Sagittarius, who's the seeker. And, when we think about the seeker, often we think about looking, we think about seeing, oh, I can see really far. And yet here is the seeker in the time of deepest darkness. So I think that's really, really interesting that we have at the end of the year, as we're going into dark, 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 is the seeker. So maybe an invitation to say, oh, the seeking, we don't actually need to necessarily do externally or with the far vision, but the seeking is instead sitting around the dying fire as it grows darker and darker and darker, and going inside ourselves and getting quiet and looking internally. And I think that is the opportunity that we are given here at the end of the year, especially to be quiet, to go within, to digest and process, and know that as divine embodied beings, we hold the light and we hold the shadow. We hold this perfect balance of these juxtaposed parts. And as long as we are afraid of the shadow or unable to access the shadow outside of ourselves, we'll never be able to access the shadow inside ourselves. Mm-hmm. So having this relationship with the unseen and the mystery externally, with the dead, with society, with, seeing skeletons and calaveras, will help us have this relationship with our own unseen parts and our own shadow, our own rejected pieces of self, forgotten memories, repressed circumstances that are holding us and holding parts of our hearts, and knowing that the seeker is here following, in I don't know, 3 weeks or so, we get to be initiated into the medicine of the seeker. Right now we're in the medicine of the alchemist, the magic worker. And, pretty soon here we'll have the opportunity to turn our gaze inward in a new way as well.
Yeah, super important. And that's the recipe for a fully fleshed out individual, but also practitioner, someone who is a guide for others. Being a spiritual mentor, guide, healer, whatever you want to call it, is not about just allowing, it's not just about being in the light. It's not just allowing people access to, be in your light and being in your heart. It's like, no, get into your gut and what's really going wrong here, and all of the things that need to be, pulled out and looked at, and cleaning out the back of the closet. And, it's like, well, because there's skeletons in the back of the closet. So we got to get to those guys and see what the heck is back there. And the more that we're able to do that for ourselves, the more that we're able to do that with others, and to just be able to hold space for where people are, as we all are each going through these layers and levels of our own personal transformation and growth, and digging through the lifetimes of stuff that people are processing right now.
Mm-hmm. I had a thought just a couple minutes before we jumped on. I want to slightly change tracks here and see, throw this out for food for thought, see how this lands. I think it's really interesting that we have our elections during this time of year, during this time of where the darkness is closer and more accessible than ever before, and where we're calling in these energies of catharsis. And I think, 2 years ago, when we experienced a pretty, sort of plunge into the darkness election, and I just remember that was right. I think we had just done, 1 or 2 episodes immediately before the election last year, and both of us were like, shocked and like, how did that happen? I think a lot of people were feeling that way. And now we've got another election happening. And it's sort of interesting to look at in these cycles of knowing we have these repeat cycles. And here we are again around this time. What catharsis have we invited in, and what catharsis are we inviting in? Rather than if our elections took place, under the Capricorn, influence, for example, which is about the bedrock and stability. I think it's so interesting that right now all of the energetic signatures are pointing toward burn that shit down if it ain't working, So what are we, and like, let it go, release the leaves. What leaves are we, and what catharsis is needing to take place as people are voting right now?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I mean, it definitely, I'm sure it was originally chosen as this, shift of the season. Okay, everybody's got their harvest in, and before it starts snowing, let's try to get people to vote. And
probably, and take office in January. Right?
This is the only time of year we could do it, because otherwise people need to be farming and stuff. And yet it is because it's that pivot point where we're like, okay, we've harvested, like, let's look, like, we can look around at our country and go, this is what we just harvested. Great. Awesome. Look at what we're harvesting, people. This is what we sowed. This is what we're harvesting. And at this point now we're going into winter and going into like whatever you harvested, whatever we as a nation have harvested, like this is what we're going to have to sit with. And, you know, whether your crops were amazing and you had a great harvest and you put away a bunch of food and you're going to do good for the winter and you did some good hunting and you're going to settle in, you're going to be okay for the winter, or you made some really bad decisions and things didn't go well and now winter's going to be really lean and hard. Like we're all collectively and individually looking at those pieces, and we try to pretend like we're not still connected to those cycles of how things work in our awareness, and yet we are. And I think having an awareness of that, it gives us greater access to, oh, okay, why am I making this decision right now? What's
Mm-hmm.
going on for me right now?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think we are looking at this piece of where this lands, you know, for us, and you know how things are going to shift or move for us based on the decisions that we're making.
Yeah, absolutely. So as you are getting out and voting,
Please vote.
Vote, please.
I did my voting yesterday because I'm going to be out of town, so I voted yesterday.
Awesome.
I dropped it off to a very nice little old lady at the library.
Yeah, awesome. I haven't turned mine in yet, but it will happen in the next 2 days. So it'll be in. Please vote. Please vote. Enough said. And as we're looking at what is happening in terms of that same type of frequency that we're looking at energetically, of we have this harvest here. We're kind of coming down to, you know, the year isn't over by any means, and especially for the entrepreneurs among us. I mean, we're still working, you know, and there's still projects going on.
Not me. No, it's stopping everything.
Well, fine for you, but you're coming to help on my retreat, so you better not stop too hard.
No, I'm working. I'm not sowing seeds. I'm harvesting. I'm harvesting.
Right. And so, yes, for the entrepreneurs among us, there is still, you know, I'm not planting any, well, actually, that's not true. I am planting seeds. I'm opening applications for I Am Alchemy 2019 in 2 days, but, you know, right. But that's a different kind of planting. It's a very gentle, like, okay, based on the seeds of this year, I am very, very slowly. It's like my, you know, a list of 15 people who I'm inviting to apply
right.
first. Like,
but remember last year, I was like, Michelle, do not let me go into sales mode in December again. Don't let me do it. Like, I don't want to do that. I want to be, you know, in the darkness. Like, this isn't where I want to be.
Well, and you didn't even need me to tell you that this year. You went and moved yourself, and now you're putting yourself in that quiet position. Good job.
Right.
And so, you know, so with this, looking at how do we put ourselves and set ourselves up to be either in alignment with the cycles. You know, we have our seasons of life personally and our seasons externally. Sometimes they all, you know, they line up, sometimes they don't. And finding that, you know, things are usually a little more comfortable when they do. So, you know, Kat, for example, not doing massive sales push in December. I don't do a massive sales push at the end of the year either. And yet for me, this summer was incredibly hard because there was so much energy, and because I was in a sales cycle, I was expending a lot of energy. I burned out my system. So I'm probably not going to do that anymore because the aligning of those cycles was too intense.
We're like, can we try to figure out sales cycles, please?
Spring and fall, I think, is what it's feeling like. But trial and error, it's, you know, benefit from the wisdom of our experience if you like. But knowing that right now, this is a time of harvest. This is a time for review. And this is a time, again, when we're working with these, you know, these spirits and these energies that can help us access these parts of ourselves and these parts of our businesses, these parts of our lives that are a little bit under the surface. You know, so some helpful questions to ask, you know, maybe sitting in meditation and asking, what am I not seeing that I need to see? Mm-hmm. Now there is space for me to start to bring into my consciousness. What am I not seeing in the area of my life, my relationships, my business, my purpose, whatever area is calling to you? What needs to be seen? And how does it need to be honored? This is the other piece. where we're talking a lot in, in Halloween terms and in, working with the dead about noticing and seeing and acknowledging they're there. And yet the other part is honoring. The other part is giving thanks and having a place for that, giving recognition, giving offerings. So whatever awareness comes into your field, I invite you to treat it with with gratitude. Make an offering. Say, thank you so much. I see this area of my relationships that has previously been in the darkness, but now it's coming into my awareness. Thank you. I'm going to make an offering to that of saying mantra or of breath, or I'm going to actually do a physical offering or go pour water on the ground or whatever the deal is, in the same way that you would receive the blessings of the unseen ancestors, the departed, the spirits. So these awarenesses are also part of that connection to the mystery. When we're receiving access to information, when we're receiving access to guidance, it's yet another access point into the mystery and the unknown, and we can treat it in that same honoring.
Mm-hmm. Love it. So good. Can I share some ghosty stuff?
Yeah, always.
So I just have to share this because, so when this month came up in the channeling group and I was doing the teachings and the meditation for working with the deceased, and Gosei was doing a lot of research, and there's some really fascinating from the Taoist perspective. So the Chinese, from the Chinese shamans, and throughout the history of China, these different teachings around, there's so many teachings around ghosts and the underworld and spirits and demons, and it's just such a fascinating and huge study and body of work what's out there. But something that I found really fascinating is that one of the things that they say is the reason that this time of year that there are more ghosts being seen is because it is not that there are more ghosts, but that they are just more easily can take form that we can see, because they need some sort of electromagnetic energy in order to materialize. And so in the fall at this time, as the fog is coming in and the rain and the shift of the barometric pressure, that's helping ghosts bring form because they're utilizing the electromagnetic energy to be seen. And that also that they believe that the ectoplasm, which you might remember, like from Ghostbusters, there's all of the goo of the ectoplasm. And if you read about spiritism and different works where people would be producing ectoplasm from ghosts, is that they believe that actually the ghosts aren't producing any ectoplasm, that what's happening is that these psychics, so people who have a greater ability to see, hear, experience ghosts in some way, that they have a higher level of magical chi. So they have this very special magical chi, and that the magical chi actually produces the ectoplasm. So the psychics are actually producing this ectoplasmic energy, and that the ghosts are using that ectoplasmic energy to create a form, to create some sort of manifestation of their and their energy, their spirit body being able to be seen and materialized. And so I just thought that was really fascinating, because it's not how we're usually taught about ghosts, but from the Taoist perspective, that's what they believed. And they also say that you should not be doing seances, as we see them on TV at night with the wind and the darkness, but during the day, that if you want to contact a specific deceased person with a seance or using your Ouija board or whatever, that you should do that during the day, because you'll be much more likely to actually reach that particular person instead of the myriad, many ghosty beings that are flippering about looking for somebody to chat with.
Cool. Well, and it's funny you say, like, oh, we aren't normal, like, this isn't normally the way that we're taught things about ghosts. And I'm thinking, like, well, when are we ever taught things about ghosts? I mean, if the Taoist tradition is like
Ghostbusters.
Well, clearly, if it's either like, Taoist philosophy or Ghostbusters, which one are we more likely to have access to? Ghostbusters. Which one is more likely to be relevant and have helpful information? Taoist philosophy.
Yeah, no, Ghostbusters. What we're taught about ghosts, witches, werewolves, vampire, like all of any fairies, like whatever it is, it's either from a really scary fairy tale written by some really grumpy German dudes, or a very scary movie trying to, make you pee your pants.
Or interpret the very scary fairy tale in a commercially accessible way. So
you can buy a new lunchbox.
Right. Yeah. Grimm's fairy tales, all like, you want to talk about historical access to the darkness. And yet that isn't super sellable because it's creepy and weird and convoluted. And so you give the Disney version of that, is how we historically are taught about ghost stories and mythos. And I guess, mythos in general, like looking at, some of the mythology behind this and looking at consistently the way in which humanity has related to the darkness, talking about like Hades and Persephone going to the underworld. Like that's a super early, and this is a timely example for that story. So I'm giving you the super quick and dirty version. Persephone, the daughter of Demeter, who is the goddess of the harvest, she goes and she picks the flower from the underworld and she gets sucked down to the underworld, and Hades likes her. And so the story goes that he wants to keep her there and she's a prisoner, and Demeter's super sad. So she kills the harvest, and Zeus is like, yo, people are starving. That can't happen. And so they work out a deal where Persephone spends 6 months above ground with her mother, during which the harvest is flowering and fruiting. And then she spends 6 months down under with Hades, and that's fall and winter. And so the story goes, oh, Persephone is a poor victim. Oh. However, think about it. I mean, here's this like precious daughter of the harvest, like golden child, teenager. Don't you think she might have some fun going down to the underworld to play with the super sexy, like dark god, right? And so there's this, how are we twisting this original mythos around, what is the fascination with the darkness, with the mystery, with the unseen, and what part of ourselves as light, quote unquote, as light as we may be, has this fascination and this need to explore the part of ourselves that we can only access through the darkness. And so instead of seeing Persephone as the victim who, oh, poor girl, she has to spend 6 months underground, see her as this part, as the seeker who is saying, this isn't all of me. This isn't the whole picture. I see this other part, this access point to the mysteries. I'm going to go underground and check that out. And it becomes this balance of self. And that's how we have this, it's reflected as the balance of the seasons. It's reflected as the cycle of death and going underneath. And, and the whole thing about the pomegranate and like the like fruit of the underworld, and it's this like super sexy fruit, and the seeds of that, yet it's like the symbol of fertility, and it's this symbol connected to the underworld. And so all of these symbols that have the multiple access point of light, but have this origin in the darkness. So knowing that now is the time of year that we get to embellish, and we get to explore, and we get to wear these really beautiful costumes, and we get to dress up as our dark side or the alter ego of ourselves. All of that is super healthy in its manifestation of having a better access point and relationship to the unseen. Go read more complete version of that. It was a really quick and dirty version. But.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. All right. Well, we're just about at time here. And any parting words of wisdom for our moment at the Veil?
Happy Halloween. I don't know. Just enjoy it, and know that everything that you do to cultivate a healthier relationship with the darkness and with the unseen will serve you not only externally, but internally and societally.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. And I often say that the demons are our greatest teachers, that they are there for a reason, to give us greater insight and inquiry into ourselves and teach us about ourselves in ways that really light and angels and fluffy unicorns can't. And we all love light and angels and fluffy unicorns, and we want to live there. And some of us struggle so much with this of trying to stay in fluffy unicorns all of the time that we don't let ourselves experience this other side, and we push it and shun it and demonize it. We demonize the demons instead of being really quiet and present and being like, okay, well, why are you showing up in my life? Why shadow aspect of myself? Why shadow outside of myself that is appearing outside of me so that I can learn something about inside of me? Why are you here? And what am I here to learn? And what is my place in the larger, grander scheme of my service to the world and my service to the spiritual realms as well in coming in contact with you? Mm-hmm. And, you know, for some of you, this is a juicy, big part of your work. So it's going to show up. And the more that you push it away and spend all your time trying to be like, no, I want to be like so-and-so who is like a fluffy unicorn. Like, let her be a fluffy unicorn. Like, just stop comparing yourself to the fluffy unicorn girl and like actually do what's showing up for you, because, you know, we all want to do that, right? We all want to be like, oh.
Do we though?
A lot of us do. A lot of us, we want, I mean, some of us are a little addicted to the shadow part too, right? We all have our thing, but it's easy in the spiritual realms and the spiritual communities to have this comparison game of value of light over dark, because we're given that message over and over again.
Well, and yet, I mean, that's just another facet of what we've been speaking to, is about not actually valuing what is there in the darkness. So it's, you know, it's easier, I guess, to value what you can see. And it's harder to place priority and importance on the unseen. So that's our invitation for you today. Yeah. And so with that, you know, we are closing out. Just please do practice your energetic safety as you're doing this. You know, please just keep in mind that we've got a whole lot of episodes on how to do this in a way that keeps you super safe, is energetically sound, and isn't going to invite in any energy that you don't want to stick around. So go ahead back and review and practice safe channeling practices. Everybody use intentions, right?
Intentions, light your candles. This is an important time of year for keeping your candles lit. And if you are engaging in any spiritual works and endeavors, to be utilizing best practices. And if you're not aware of what those best practices are, then be doing less until you become aware of those best practices, and reach out to your favorite spiritual, energetic, shamanic practitioner to receive support in this area. Mm-hmm. That's us.
And you can also find episodes where we do talk about that. You can find those on our YouTube channel, on iTunes, on Stitcher, under Shaman Sister Sessions. You can contact us through our email address, shamansistersessions@gmail.com, or reach out to us either individually or collectively. I know Kat has a lot of really wonderful training for this, you know, healer's process training, and she's got some really powerful resources. And for those of you who are interested, speaking of trainings, I did mention that I'm opening up applications for I Am Alchemy on Thursday, November 1st. So if that is something that you are interested in stepping into, I am taking applications starting on Thursday. You can go ahead and reach out to me, Michelle@joyofenergy.com, or go directly through my website, joyofenergy.com is a website, and you can click on the Master Alchemist training, and there's a spot to put your name on my first dibs list. So if you want first dibs on this course, go ahead and put yourself on there. Anything you'd like to announce, Kat?
No.
Great. Awesome. Beautiful. And Kat will be coming up here to Portland, and we are pretty jam-packed, so we actually don't have any openings anymore for any one-on-ones with people, but know that that is an option. We are in the same physical location a couple of times a year. So even though we don't this time, go ahead and reach out to us, and we may have something that we can pop you on the calendar for.
Maybe mid-November.
Yeah. Okay. Mid-November, but not beforehand. Yeah. So if there is something that you'd like to talk with both of us about, or come see us both for a session, that would be an option mid-November. Otherwise, go ahead and stay tuned. I recommend circling back around to some older episodes. We will be taking next week off, and possibly the week after, as we both have retreat and travel plans. So we'll be upping our skill level. We'll be doing some deep dives, some retreat work, and we'll come back with super magical extra bonus electric juju to be sharing with all of you. And recommending, again, in this time of slowing down, as we are slowing down, we're becoming a little bit less available, I will say. In the fall, you may have noticed more gaps in our episode schedule, and that is on purpose, because both Kat and I, as we mentioned, coming into this time of kind of slowness and a little bit more harvest, a little bit more reflection. It's temporary. Don't worry about it. We will still have episodes throughout the end of the year, and then we'll be kicking back up a little bit more in the spring. So in the meantime, again, go ahead and circle back around to anything in case you missed last year's Day of the Dead episode. That one was really good, and we gave a lot of tools for working with deceased ancestors. So happy Halloween, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us, and we will see you in a couple weeks. Bye.